first commandment of podcasting. Thou shalt have good production quality. It doesn't have to be the best. It certainly doesn't have to be as over the top as this video, with spy mission, drone shot intros, and B-roll. But if you want to create awareness, grab attention, and build authority in your marketplace using multimedia podcasts, then your production quality must be good enough that your message isn't missed. Production quality is a key component of the unconscious trust signals your content marketing will be sending to your target buyers. The good news is achieving a consistent high level of quality in your podcasting efforts really only requires that you nail 4 simple things. We're going to cover those 4 things in detail in this video. Hi, my name is Richard Matthews, and welcome to the Push Button Podcast Show. This show is for the busy entrepreneur who wants to leverage podcasting as a way to generate awareness for their products and services, grab the attention of their audience, and build undeniable authority in their marketplace. We will cover the tips and tricks you need to know so that you can use podcasting as a method of driving leads and sales in your business, and nothing else. If that sounds good to you, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and push the notification bell so we can make sure you get our new content as it comes out. Now, let's get back to the first commandment of podcasting and rewind time back to when I recorded the rest of this video so I can show you how I achieved good production quality with this miniature studio in the back of my RV. Let's hit rewind. You probably noticed that I'm standing outside this here RV behind me. That's actually my home. In the spring of 2017, my wife and I sold everything we owned, bought an RV, and took our life and our business on the road. I now run Push Button Podcasts, which is a multinational podcasting agency from the back of the office I built in this RV. The reason that's important is the office also doubles as my own podcasting studio. I've recorded more than 200 interviews from the studio I built in there, and I regularly get compliments from my guests and clients on how top-notch my studio looks. But it's small, like really small. Those tight constraints mean I have to keep my studio very, very simple and easy to set up and use when I need it and put away when we need the space for other things. If I can build a studio that allows me to have great production quality on the go in a tiny home office on wheels, then you have no excuses not to abide by the first commandment of podcasting yourself. So, do you want to see my mini studio and nerd out over the gear that makes it all possible? I thought you might. Gearheads are my kind of people. So let's go inside and I'll show you what I've got. As we make our way through my RV and back to my office, and you can see as I look through the RV here, it is a crazy place. Normally I've got anywhere from 4 to 15 kids in here. 4 of them are mine. They're always bringing friends over. But as we make our way to the back office, I want to talk about 2 reasons why your production quality is super important for your business if you want to drive leads and sales. Reason number 1 is something I call unconscious trust signals. Unconscious trust signals are signals you send to your audience, whether you mean to or not, about the quality of your work and your services. So if your audio is shoddy, people are going to think to themselves unconsciously, maybe their other work is shoddy. If your video is crap, they're going to think to themselves, maybe the other work that they do is also crap. So you want your audio and visual production quality to match or exceed the level of quality that you normally deliver for your clients. The second reason is something I call psychological barriers. Now, psychological barriers are things that either hinder or encourage action in your life and your business. As an example, this is my water flosser, and if I keep it sitting here next to the sink in my RV, then I forget to use it because I don't come to the sink every morning. But if I take this same water flosser and I move it 2 feet to the right, and I put it up here in my shower, then suddenly I remember to use it because I do come and take a shower every morning. Now, the real question is, how does this apply to the first commandment of podcasting, which is to have good production quality? Well, the reason is twofold. The first one is that now you know that your production quality actually can impact the way that your potential market sees the quality of your work. Even if it's unconscious, then you're not going to do it if you don't have a good studio set up. And the second reason is if your studio is difficult to use, or it's difficult to set up, or it's not something that's a joy, then you're going to be less likely to sit down and do it consistently. Consistency is the second commandment. We'll get to that in another video. But for now, what I want to show you is what it's like to have good production quality versus not. You sat down at your desk to record, and you looked and sounded like this. then you might be discouraged from creating the content you know you need for your business to grow in today's cutthroat marketplace. But if you sat down at your desk and you looked and sounded like this, then you might be encouraged to do it more often. That was fun, wasn't it? Let's do it again. If you put in no effort, this is what you will look and sound like. This is the built-in webcam on my laptop and the built-in mics. They're getting better and better all the time, but they're no match for putting in just a little bit of money and effort to get a studio that makes you look this damn good. If you have an already set up studio, or a studio that's simple to set up like mine, where I just can set up my backdrop in a few moments by hanging it on my pre-installed hooks in the ceiling, fluffing out my backdrop here, and then I can turn around, take my camera, and just mount it to my desk, plug in the cables, turn on my lights, and be ready to go. That is what you call a psychological encouragement to action. Now let's talk about those 4 things that make up a great simple studio. But first, let me get dressed up properly. There, now I'm in character. It's amazing what a nice shirt, a little hair gel, and a cool studio setup will do for you, isn't it? So, what are the 4 things you need to nail your production quality every time in a simple, easy, cost-effective way? 1 is your lights, 2 is your camera, 3 is your microphone, and 4 is your backdrop. We'll talk about each of those in detail, but to start, we'll talk about your lights. As an example, here's a shot of me with a new haircut, my glass, and my iPhone X, which was released in 2017, showing you how even an old or subpar camera can still create fantastic results when you have proper lighting. And here is that same shot with my 2013 MacBook Pro webcam, which is definitely a very old and very subpar camera that still can look quite decent if you get the audio quality and the lighting correct for your shot. Can you see how big of a difference lighting makes, even if you were using old or subpar video equipment? It's astonishing. So lighting is the first area that I recommend you spend your time and money to get right when you are ready to start leveraging multimedia podcasts for your business. So how do you do it? 3 things. First up is the light size, shape, and softness. Let's start with size. Generally speaking, the larger the light, the better the quality of the light will be. Second, for the shape, the more round the light, the more natural the catch light in your eyes will be. The catch light is a little white shape you see that's a reflection of the lights. We're used to seeing the round sun catch light in our eyes, so a more round light is going to look more natural. And then third, there's the softness, which refers to how harsh the shadow lines are in your image. Harsher light will make for harder, generally less pleasing shadows. A bare bulb or bright direct sunlight will create this type of harsh light. Soft light will make for softer, generally more pleasing shadows. A bright cloud-covered sky where the sunlight is diffused through the clouds, or a big picture window with light filtering curtains, or a studio light with a big umbrella or softbox are all examples of soft lights. Now, since we can't control nature and we really need a simple, repeatable setup for your podcasting studio, I recommend getting the biggest, soft lights you can reasonably fit in the space you have that can be left in place or set up quickly and easily so your studio isn't cumbersome. This will generally mean you are compromising a little on the size to get convenience. But that's okay, because the commandment isn't thou shalt have Hollywood level production quality. The commandment is thou shalt have good production quality. So we can make some sacrifices on the light quality to get light convenience and ease of use. We'll talk about gear recommendations in just a moment. But next we need to talk about light position. Light position refers to the placement of the lights in your studio in relation to the subject of the video. In this case, you will likely always be the subject of the video if you're doing talking head or interview-style podcast episodes, which is the most common. So we will cover one simple style of lighting that will work 95% of the time you are shooting in your studio. That's called 3-point lighting. 3-point lighting, as the name suggests, uses 3 lights. The first light is called your key light. This light provides most of the light for your subject. The second light is called the fill light. This light serves to brighten up the shadows created by the key light. The third light is called the rim light. This light serves the purpose of separating your subject from their background. Alright, why don't you join me on my iPad and I'll show you how to set that up. Okay, so what I want to do is just give you a quick drawing overview of what three-point lighting looks like with my my poor drawing skills. So what we're going to do is say if you're sitting at your desk, I'm going to put it in pen mode here. If you're sitting at your desk like this, and here's your smiley face, and we're going to be facing this direction, right? Looking out at your desk here, and your desk is in front of you, like so. So you're looking that way, sitting at your desk, top-down view. Three-point lighting is going to be putting a light here and a light here. And so got your lights coming out. And the way that these work is you have one light over here, and this light is what you would call your key light. And you have another light over here that you would call your fill light. And your key light, this is the light that provides most of the light for your subject. So your light, if you were using your, if you had a dimmable light like one of the ones we'll talk about in this video, you might set the light to 100% power. If you have lights that aren't dimmable, you might put this one closer to you. Your fill light is then going to light up the shadows that are created by the key light. So this light's going to come across, and it's going to put shadows across the left side of your face if it's on the right side. And those shadows you don't want to be dark in your video, so you use a fill light to lighten up those shadows. For a long time in my studio as a fill light, I just used the window that I had sitting in my desk here, and I put a curtain over it so it was a little bit softer, and use that as a fill light. I now have a second one of my little Lume Cube lights, and what I do is I just put this at 50% brightness, and that gives me less light to light up those shadows on this side. It makes for a really nice natural light on this side. So that's I mentioned it's called three-point lighting. So this is light number 1, this is light number 2, and then you have a third light that is in the back, and this is called your rim light. And your rim light goes between you and your background. So if you have your background behind you, whether that's your wall or the backdrop that you put up or your studio, you put your rim light between you and the background. And what that does is it lights up the back of your head, and it creates what they call background separation. It makes you pop out from your backdrop and look a little better in your frame. There's lots of different ways you can position your rim light. I don't actually have a dedicated rim light in my studio. I just have on my ceiling, I have an LED light that is one of our room lights, and I just matched the color temperature of my key light and my fill light to whatever my ceiling light was, and I flipped that on, and because that light it's in my studio, it's located like right here, and it's shining directly down. And that light is providing the rim light between me and the background. And that is your third light. So that's three-point lighting. There's a couple of different ways you can set these all up, but you can use this basic setup for lighting pretty much any type of video you're doing. It's really useful for the podcast style video that we're talking about. But again, you can, if you have dimmable lights, you do one at 100% or whatever brightness you need. If it's 80%, then you would do your other one at 40%, so half the power. Or if you're putting your lights, they're not dimmable, you put one light, say it's 2 feet from your face, you put the other light, your fill light, 4 feet from your face, and it gives you the same sort of difference in light power by doing the distance. And then your rim light, again, you can put on either side of your head, or I've experimented with putting the rim light directly behind my head and shining this direction. I've also experimented with putting rim light behind my back and shining it up. There's all sorts of different things you can do with the rim light, but the idea is that it makes the back of your head, gives you a little bit of a glow around your skull and your hairline that makes you separate from the background and look really nice. And then if you want to get really fancy, you can always put lights on your background or other textured things to make your backdrop stuff. We'll talk more about your backdrop later. But that is a very simple three-point lighting setup for your studio. Now, one other thing I want to cover is if you take this three-point lighting and you do it from the front view, right? So let me take this and we'll do our drawing again. So if we have you facing here and your desk is here, right? And you're sitting at your desk. There's my stick drawing. Your key light and your fill light, you don't want them to be here, right? That is not where you want your key and your fill light. You want your key light and your fill light to be up and to the left and the right, right? So this is your key light number 1 and your fill light number 2. You want them up and shining towards your face this way. And that does a couple of things. So if you're like me and you wear glasses, right? So here's my glasses. Well, that's terrible drawing for glasses, but if you have glasses and you put the light at eye level, so if you put it down, I can't delete that. If you put the light at eye level here, then the light comes out of the light, hits your glasses and goes right back into the camera, and it will make your eyeballs disappear with the reflection. So when you move your light to, you move it up, when the light comes out, it hits the, it hits your glasses and bounces back down. And since your camera is here, you don't get the reflection in your glasses. So you definitely want to make sure the lights are a couple of feet above your head. So anywhere from 18 to 24 inches, depending on how bright your light is, you want to get them above your head and pointed down at your face. Also, that'll give the shadows on your face will be diagonal, so the shadows will come across this way, and which will give your face more depth, as opposed to putting the lights even with your face, which will give you essentially a flat look to your face. So that is your basics for 3-point lighting. You'll have to excuse my poor drawing skills, but that should help you get your studio lights for your podcasting studio set up properly. And that's how you set up a simple 3-point lighting situation that will work for the overwhelming majority of videos for your multimedia podcast. Okay, last topic on lighting before we get to the gear. That's your light color. In the video world, this is called your light temperature. There are 2 considerations for light temperature you need to be aware of. One is the actual color of the light you are using. This is measured as a temperature on the Kelvin scale. The range of light temperatures goes from about 1500 degrees Kelvin to about 10,000 degrees Kelvin. That temperature corresponds to the color of the light, or more specifically, the color that your eye will perceive as a pure white object in the frame. Lower temperatures of light in the 1 to 3000 Kelvin range are what we call warm lights. Candlelight would be around 1500 Kelvin. A warm white bulb you pick up at Home Depot is usually around 3000 Kelvin. These temperatures tend to be more orange or yellow. Higher temperatures in the 6 to 10,000 range are what we call cool lights. These are going to be like fluorescent lights that are about 6000 Kelvin, or that cloudy sky we talked about earlier, which is around 7000 Kelvin. These lights tend to be more blue. And finally, you have lights in the 4500 to 5500 Kelvin range. These are considered white lights. Examples would be the noonday sun, a halogen bulb, or those expensive white LED lights you see at Home Depot. This is the range you want your studio lights to be in because it will make the whites in your image and your eyes look the most natural without having to learn how to work with and adjust the white balance in your camera gear. The most important thing to note here is that you want all 3 of your lights in your 3-light point setup to have the same color temperature. Because if you mix a cool light with a warm light, you can get crazy colors like green skin, which is not flattering at all. The second consideration for color temperature is what's called the CRI of your light source. This is what's known as your color rendering index. Almost every light you buy will have a CRI rating on it, whether you pick it up off your hardware store shelf or buy it from a fancy video production outlet online. This number is scaled from 0 to 100, where the lower the number, the worse the light performs for making colors look accurate, and the higher the number, the better the light performs for making colors look accurate. All you need to know is that you want a light with a CRI above 92. The only problem with that is the closer you get to 100, the more expensive the light. So keep that in mind when you are shopping. Now, let's get to the good part and talk about gear recommendations. I'm going to keep this simple and make 2 recommendations. First up is the Falcon Eyes round LED lights. They are big. They come in lots of sizes from 10 inches all the way up to 60 inches. For the head and shoulders shot like this one that you're seeing now, A 10 to 20 inch model will work great for your key light and fill lights, and a small 7 inch could work well for your rim light if you aren't using an overhead light like I am. These are great lights because they're slim, they're lightweight, they can be easily hung from the ceiling or desk mounts, they're dimmable, so you can change the key or fill light without having to move the lights. You can just change the brightness. They're round, so you get a pleasing round catch light in your eye. And the LEDs are facing inwards and reflecting through the diffusion panel at the front, so they don't blind you like many of the LEDs that are pointing straight out of the light. And they can be plugged in or battery operated. Plus, they have a high CRI number and color temperatures that can be adjusted to match the other lights in your studio. There's a lot to like about these lights, and I have used one in my RV setup for years as my key light. I've only recently replaced it with a smaller light that makes my life easier in the tight space I have. If you have the space, go for these Falcon lights. The second light is the Lume Cube Panel Pros. I recommend these for people who have space or monetary budget constraints. They're relatively inexpensive compared to the Falcon Eyes, but compact with features that will work great for a mini studio. High CRI numbers, adjustable color temperature. They come with a clip-on diffusion panel to make the light a little softer. They're dimmable, they're battery operated or USB-C plug-inable, and they have 1/4-20 mounts on all 4 sides, making them a breeze to mount anywhere in your office. Plus, they have Bluetooth connectivity to an app on your phone to make adjusting brightness and color temperature super fast and easy. My only complaint is that they are a much smaller light and they are rectangular instead of round. And again, generally speaking, larger is better and round is the best shape. But they are so small and compact compared to the Falcon Eyes that in my tiny RV studio, these lights are now my main everyday key and fill lights. Oh, that was a lot to cover in just a few minutes. I hope you don't mind getting a whole training course worth of information in one video. Let's go ahead and move on to the next section, which is your camera. Alright, the next bit of gear we need to talk about is your camera. Cameras are a huge world of technology that are always changing and expanding. So I can't get into a ton of details about this camera or that and have this be a useful video for more than a few months. So instead, I'm going to focus on a few principles that will serve you no matter when you watch this video and no matter what cameras are on the market at this moment. There are 3 things you need to be concerned with when it comes to the picture quality coming out of your camera. 1 is the sensor size. 2 is the lens selection. And 3 is what I call the webcam ability. Let's talk about sensor size first. The sensor is the chip in your digital camera that gathers light and makes your video image. The sensor is measured in 2 ways. 1 is the physical dimensions of the sensor. 2 is the number of pixels, the things that actually gather light, in that space. This is always a battle of physics. Bigger pixels gather light better, but more pixels give you better detail. The bigger the pixel, the fewer of them you can fit into a given space. So a 35mm sensor with 10 megapixels will have much better light gathering capability than a 35mm sensor with 20 megapixels. But when it comes to detail, the 20 megapixel sensor will be twice as detailed, but it will need 2 times as much light to get the same image quality as the one with half the number of larger pixels. Now, multiply this out to every different smartphone camera, webcam, point and shoot, drone camera, and interchangeable lens camera, and you can see why picking the right camera can be very difficult. So, as a rule of thumb, get the biggest sensor you can with the largest pixels you can get. The higher density pixel sensors tend to be better for photography, and the larger pixel sensors tend to be better for video, which is what we're after. Also, the larger the sensor, the better the bokeh, or the background blur you will get for any given lens paired with that sensor. More background blur equals a more professional appearance. So a webcam will have a tiny sensor. A smartphone will be a tad larger. Then your point and shoot cameras will be the next size up. And then you will have your ASP-C sized sensors. And then the largest will be what is known as full frame sensors or a 35mm sensor. Sensors do get bigger, but then we are talking about cinema or commercial work, so we're not interested in those. So if budget allows, get a full-frame sensor camera from a big manufacturer like Canon, Nikon, or Sony. Sony being my personal preference. If budget or size is a concern, get an ASP-C size sensor from one of the same manufacturers. Again, Sony is my preference. My current camera that you're watching right here is the Sony a6500 with 24 megapixel ASP-C sized sensor, and you can see with good lighting it makes a great image. Okay. The second section is the lens selection. This will be very dependent on the camera you are using and your studio setup. In an ideal world, a 50mm lens paired with a full-frame sensor is the closest you can get to a camera's image looking the same way as your eyeball sees the world. If you go wider with the lens, then you get a more bowed picture as the lens squeezes more of the world into the same size rectangle. This has the effect of making your nose bigger in the frame than it is in real life. If you go more zoomed in with the lens, then you get more compression in the image as the lens expands less of the world to fill up the same size rectangle. Human faces tend to look best in what is called the 50 to 85mm equivalent on a 35mm sensor. With the 50mm lens, you will need to be closer to the subject to get this type of head and shoulders shot. An 85mm lens, you would need to move further away for the same framing. The 85mm would be slightly more pleasing and professional looking since it's just a little tighter than the eye can see. If I had the room in my studio, that's what I'd use. But I'd need to have about 4 feet more space to move my camera back to use that kind of lens setup. If you're on an ASP-C sized sensor, the 35mm equivalent focal lengths are 30mm to 55mm, or what's known as a 1.6x differential factor. You will always see lenses measured in their 35mm equivalent measurement. Since I'm using an ASP-C sized sensor, my favorite lens to use for video is my 30mm lens. It's fantastic and makes me look amazing. But because my space is so constrained, I don't get to use it often because I have to move further away from my camera to get this head and shoulders framing, which puts me too close to my backdrop. So this is where your studio comes in for compromises. In an ideal world, you use a 55mm lens on an ASP-C sensor or an 85mm lens on a full frame, and you have the space for it and the space to put your backdrop a few feet behind that. But we don't live in an ideal world, so if you have to compromise for size or space, do it. My compromise is using a 10 to 18mm zoom lens that's set to 18mm, which is very wide and does distort me a little, and looks less flattering than the 30mm lens does. But it gets me the framing I want while still preserving some of that professional looking bokeh and background blur. Now, one more note on bokeh. The background blur is controlled by 3 things. One is your sensor size. Bigger equals better background blur. 2 is your aperture size. Bigger aperture equals better background blur. These are measured as a fraction, so a smaller number equals a bigger aperture. f2.0 is a bigger aperture than f4.0. So smaller number is better. Get the biggest aperture you can get for your lens and your camera combo. The third is your subject distance from the background. All other things being the same, the further the subject is from the background, the more blur the background will have, and the better and more professional the subject and the background separation will be. In an ideal world, you have a 55 to 85mm lens with lots of space between the camera and the subject, and lots of space between the subject and the background. But as you can see in my tiny space where none of those things are true, you can still get really good results. Good thing we're only shooting for good quality and not Hollywood quality. Okay, the last thing is webcam ability. This just means that you need to be able to connect the camera to your computer to be able to use it as a webcam with apps like Zoom or Zencastr. Now, most camera manufacturers since the start of the pandemic have released software updates that allow their cameras to be used via USB as a webcam. The only problem is not many of these cameras have the processor capable of handling streaming video very well over the USB connections. They just aren't fast enough, so they will stutter or lag. The better option by far is to use the native HDMI output of the camera and use a capture card that turns the HDMI feed into a webcam. Most ASP-C sized cameras or larger will have an HDMI feed. Just check that you can set it to have what's called a clean output, meaning it won't send all of the camera data over the top of the image, things like shutter speed, ISO, and aperture data that you usually see on the back of the camera. You want the feed out the HDMI to just be the image. All of the Sony cameras do this. Then you just pick up an Egalto Camlink 4K. Plug it in via HDMI and you are off to the races with a fantastic camera in place of a small, crappy webcam. I can't really make recommendations on your camera though, because so much is dependent on your space. But if you want a great middle-of-the-road cost-wise that will get you amazing picture quality and be very forgiving with light and will work with all but the tightest of spaces, then get a Sony a6000 series camera. These all come with an ASP-C sized sensor. Then pair it with a Sigma 30mm f1.4 lens. This is a great inexpensive combo that can have you looking like a rock star. Okay, next let's talk about backdrops. Since we just talked about how the background affects your image quality, let's talk about that next. Your studio backgrounds can be as varied as your camera options. You can go with a full-on custom studio that is purpose-built for your show that costs a lot and looks fantastic. Or you can go with nothing at all and just make sure the space behind you looks clean and beautiful, or anywhere in between. What I found is that having a simple cloth backdrop is the easiest thing that works the best in most situations. It's not as fancy as you can get, but it's quick, cheap, and easy. And you can still look really good. You have only a few considerations for a backdrop. Get one that has a simple, clean texture. I like brick, wood, or something like this flag. Don't go for anything more busy than that, or it can detract from your main subject. Unless you can get one that matches the theme of your show in some way. The second thing is size. You want the backdrop to be as far away from you as you can get while still filling the frame completely with your chosen camera lens combo. So when you're shopping, make sure that you take that into account. The ones I recommend come in many sizes. Just get one that fits your space. I measured my length and height for where I wanted to mount it, and then hung a sheet folded into that space to make sure my lens wouldn't be seeing the edges of it. Then I ordered a backdrop slightly larger than that to fit the size. The backdrops I recommend are Kate backdrops on Amazon. They come in nice textures and many different sizes, so you can get one that fits your space. And if it's oversized, you can cut it down to fit. Just don't get one that's too small. And they are cloth, so they're easy to take down, fold up, and even throw in the washer if they get dirty. Okay, so that's basically it on backdrops. They're pretty simple. Last up is microphones. This is probably one of the easiest sections to get right, but also the one that most ignore. Your audio quality is the 80-20 of your production quality. Get the audio right, and it almost doesn't matter if everything else is a little off. So don't skimp on your mic. You have two options here. Option number one, use the microphone input on your camera and plug in a decent camera mic into it. The Agalto Camlink 4K that we talked about earlier will recognize that mic and pass it on to your computer for recording. I'm a huge fan of using a lavalier mic in this way. I use the Giant Squid lavalier mic from Amazon. It's an amazing little piece of kit and the sound quality is really good. It's actually what you're listening to right now. Option number two is to pick up a USB powered mic for setting on your desk. My two favorites are the Blue Yeti mics that you see everywhere. These are huge though. Or the mic that I use, which is the Apogee Hype mic, which is significantly smaller for the same or better sound quality and also a little bit more expensive. No matter which mic setup you choose to go with, make sure the mic is as close to your mouth as you can get without actually being in front of your mouth. With the USB mic, a little pop filter to help with the plosives that come with the P sound is a useful addition. Your other consideration is your room noise. If you can, make sure the fans, AC, washer and dryer, and other such things are off if you can when you're recording. This will make your sound much better. But for when you can't control life, and I swear the RV parks where we stay specifically wait until I'm recording to mow the grass outside your RV. Like every frickin' time. Then you can add a little software to help. Then check out Crisp.ai, which is a software live noise removal system that will help your recording software be able to just hear your voice and not the noisy children, the inconsiderate lawnmowers, or the AC noise. Definitely worth the $4 a year. I've got a link to that in the description below. And that's it. Those are the 4 things you need to get right in your studio so that you always have good production quality. Your lights, your camera, your backdrop, and your microphone. It's pretty simple. But if you set up something easy to use that looks great, then you will be inspired to sit down and regularly record content. In the content marketing world, that consistency, paired with the great-looking visuals and high-quality audio, is what will set you apart from your competition and generate the awareness, attention, and authority that will ultimately drive more leads and sales into your business. So take the time to get this step right. If you need more help in this area, please click the link in the description below. I've set up an entire mini studio purchase and setup guide that walks you through everything we talked about in this video and will help you get it set up in your office. We are even offering one-on-one studio consults where we will hop on a video call with you and help you get your lighting and camera gear set up right in your space so your videos look as professional as the rest of your business. All the details are in the link below. Finally, if you want to join me in the next part of this series where we talk more about making consistently recording content super easy, then make sure you hit that subscribe button below and click the notification bell so you're notified when it comes out. That video will be called The 10 Commandments of Podcasting number 2, Thou Shalt Be Consistent. Also, if you learned something new in this video, please hit the like button. That helps me know I'm on the right track creating this content, and it helps the YouTube algorithm know this is quality content worth showing to other people just like you who might benefit from it. So really, pushing that like button is a little bit like paying it forward. Okay, thank you for watching the Push Button Podcast show. Be sure to check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com or by clicking the link below in the description.